I love great conversations. Hi, my name is Angel Jones. Thank you for joining me on 12-minute convos where I help you create a brand of your own unique, real self. Listen in as I have conversations with amazing people from all over the world. Good morning, Rob St. Mary. How are you going on this wonderful, beautiful morning?
I am doing well, sir. It's, it was a little cool waking up this morning here in Michigan because we're getting into that time of year where it's late fall. Well, I guess maybe a little early fall. I don't know. It's definitely fall, I'll tell you that much. So.
Yeah. So the bite is definitely in the breeze, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's cold when you got the cats cuddling up with you. So I got one on my lap right now as we talk.
Oh. Very well. There's something I offer to my guests that do join me, which is an email of Caribbean sunshine that I can definitely send to you.
It'll work for the middle of February when it's dying here. Yes.
We'll do well. Rob, please first let me say to our amazing audience, please excuse the construction noise that's going on outside, but I hope it adds character to the conversation. That being said, my friend, please do tell us which of your talents is responsible for us connecting.
I believe it would be podcasting. So since you are interested in doing this podcast experiment of the people that you're interviewing over a set amount of time, and I think it was through LinkedIn, you messaged me and said, hey, would you like to do this? And I was like, sure. Why not? And it's not every day I get to talk to someone from the Caribbean with a fantastic accent like yours.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And it's not every day I get this amazing, deep voice that I'm hearing in my ears, which is pretty intriguing. It sounds as though you have some radio history. I mean, tell us more about the podcast and your path, please.
Sure. I started in radio in 2001. I went to broadcast school here in the Metro Detroit area. And while people were interested in going to TV or becoming a DJ, I always had an interest in news. So I became a news reporter. I worked in various stations. First 7 years of my career was in commercial radio. So I worked at news talk stations in Michigan. And then I transitioned to work at the public radio station that I grew up listening to just near my home here at WDET 101.9 FM in Detroit. And I worked there for 5 years from 2008 to 2013. And then I worked in Colorado for 2 years. And then I moved back home in 2015. And I thought, 14 years in radio, it's over, I'm done. Time to do something else. And a friend of mine who is the arts and culture reporter over at the Detroit Free Press, which is the one of the two dailies here in Detroit, he contacted me and said, what if we created a show where you could be doing a weekly podcast, arts and culture podcast? So I developed that show, and it was called Detours, and it ran from July of 15 until October of 16. At the same time, when I was in radio for about 4 years, I was working with a friend of mine on his show, which is still going. I don't have any ill will towards him. I'm just way too busy to do the show, called The Projection Booth. So if you're a film fan and you want, as we were called by the AV Club, the serious arts and culture reporting at The Onion, pharmaceutical grade film geekery, feel free to check out the Projection Booth. Each week it's one film, and we do a deep dive on that show. So there'll be writers, directors, actors, producers, people who've maybe written books. And as I say about the Projection Booth, those episodes were kind of like Fight Club in the rules of Fight Club. The fights go on as long as they have to. The podcast goes on as long as it has to. So they've been anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half up to 7 hours long.
Wow.
In order to cover the subject, yeah.
Well, I could see the passion fueling. I got to listen to that podcast. I could see the passion fueling the conversation, and I could see the listener definitely being enthralled by the content there.
Yeah, I mean, the idea was sort of like, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the 33 and a third series of books, in that each one is focused on a specific record, the 33 and a third series. And our idea was that if we created the podcast that wasn't so time sensitive that you had to listen to it now or this week or this month in order for it to make sense. But it was sort of a lasting record of that film that you could listen to it at any time. It didn't matter.
Yeah, it's timeless. Love that.
Yeah.
So who did you learn the skill of? We definitely understand the radio aspect, like you've done your time, right? But it seems as though there's a point where you listen very intently. Who did you learn that from?
I think it was because I was an only child. So my earliest memories of being an only child, and I tell friends of mine who have kids that being an only child, you're mostly, at least I was, raised around adults. And one of the things that made it hard being an only child at times was it was hard to relate to kids and kind of how kids play and act. So I was being treated like an adult from a very young age. And I remember my dad belonged to a few veterans clubs. And I remember going to the veterans clubs with my dad, and usually it was like, right, 8 o'clock, all the kids out, get them out of here. Except I used to be able to stay, and I could stay as long as I wanted. So, and part of the reason for that was I would usually sit in the corner and read, or I would draw or write or whatever, and I didn't bother anybody. So I learned how to observe, and I learned how to deal with adults at a young age. And part of that was just listening and kind of, staying out of the way.
Yeah. Or at least, if not staying out of the way, definitely understanding how to integrate, right? Without being seen, right? Or being a subject. That is pretty intriguing. That being said, and being the individual who is now traversed the two sides, right? The person that is speaking and being out there, and the person who is quiet. I'd like to know why you'll continue in either or.
For me, it's about situation. I would have to say that my ability to be out there in public has gotten better. I was, even though I did have a public job, I was usually very quiet, and always have been very quiet in public situations. There was a great quote, and I'm going to kind of mangle it horribly, was Laurence Olivier, the great actor, was asked why did he always wear some sort of makeup, either on stage or in a film, like an appliance, like a fake nose or something.
Yeah.
Mustache. And he said that he couldn't stand to go on stage without that. He would be naked. And for him, that was a way for him to focus through to the character so it wasn't him. So that if people booed or they came up to him or they said something or whatever, it was the character. It wasn't him. There was a level of distance, even if it was a very small one, between him and the public. And I found that for myself, when I was in that role as a reporter, when I had a microphone in my hand, when I was doing the radio work or whatever, I could ask anybody anything. Because what I figured out was that if they were rejecting me, if they were saying something against me in some way, they were saying it about the reporter. They weren't saying about me personally. So there was a certain distance from the world in that way, just through, just a small thing. That's not to say that I was putting on some sort of show or character. It was just a small device, just put it that way. And I found that kind of opened me up a bit more to the world. And now I'm at a point where I think I don't need that so much.
Yeah. Wow, that is intriguing. Wow. All right. Tell me one other thing that you've done consistently over the last 3 years, please, Rob.
Well, I'm almost up on 3 years on this. This is part of the transition out from being in radio and podcasting. Is I'm now a co-owner in a company that does civic crowdfunding, oftentimes with matching grants here in the United States. So the name of the company is Patronicity. That's Patron, I-C-I-T-Y.
Right.
You can find more at patronicity.com. And as I said, we do civic crowdfunding or community crowdfunding. People who have things like parks, art centers, trails, they want to do murals, things like that to improve the community. And right now we have a program in 3 states in the U.S. where we have matching funds for nonprofits and cities that may want to fix up or build some community infrastructure, community good.
Sounds great. Wow, sounds great. So how does that make you feel now that you're doing this? And it's almost been 3 years consistently.
Yeah, it's been pretty amazing because when I transitioned out of public radio, and doing the podcast full time, it was a question of what was I going to do with myself. And what I found is that in a lot of ways, crowdfunding is storytelling, and that's ultimately what I was doing, was storytelling. And in another way, public radio in the States also has a fundraising element. So twice a year at least, we go on air and we ask people, to send in $50 to help make the radio happen. So if you could take those elements of what you learned in the past and look at it more as a skill set instead of a job in that way, because I think kind of where I grew up was very blue collar in Detroit. We were very like job focused. It's like, what job do you have and how does that job define you? It was never really discussed in terms of skill sets, things that you learn and how you can take those and move them in different places. So for me, I had to kind of break out of this mold of the job and move into an idea of the skill set and how I can use the skills that I've developed through storytelling, through radio, through the podcasts in many ways, and use that to develop something new. And what I've seen is in terms of great outcomes is how these neighbors and communities come together in order to create something beautiful in their own community. And it can be a very small community. It can be 400 people, or it can be here in Detroit where, you have 700,000 in the city, but, 5 million in the metro, and just really create some beautiful things for neighbors and community to come around and build around and create around.
Wow. I could speak with you for like 3 hours easily. I'm like reining in. Okay, let's keep this to 12. Come on, let's do this. I'm really intrigued. Next year, I think I'm going to do longer conversations with certain individuals. Definitely would like to have you on that. Just expand the conversation. There's someone listening out there, Rob, and they are in a similar set. Did the radio time possibly, or did some other time. Why would you suggest to them they do what you've done by expanding your borders, if you would?
Well, I mean, the big thing for me, like I said, is to really understand what the skills are. I think a lot of times, like I said, at least for me, I felt that I was defined by a job title or a certain career path. And if I wasn't that, then what was I? And I think understanding the skills that you learn on the job, storytelling or audio production or whatever it is, making connections, doing research, all of those things are very viable in many different places. And to not get so stuck in on a job title that defines the totality of who you are or what it is that you do.
Rob, where's the best place for someone to go to connect with you if they need to?
Sure. There's Rob, ROBSTMARY, RobStMary.com, which is sort of a general holding place for some of my stuff. You'll see things about the writing, about the podcast. There's links up there to my radio work as well. And then also I have a record label called Hold Fast, which you can find at hfvinyl.com. And Patronicity, as I said, is the crowdfunding site. So patronicity.com.
Love it.
So anywhere there.
Sweet. Well, Rob, let's switch gears for a moment now and let me invite you into my time machine that is surrounded with beautiful, warm, blue Caribbean water. Rob, what is your earliest childhood memory?
Oh, man. Earliest childhood memory is, and I don't remember it from a visual sense. I remember from an auditory sense, which is interesting considering I went on to work in radio and audio, was my folks took me to see Star Wars when I was probably 2. And I was born in 78, so Star Wars came out in 77, but you have to remember that before VHS and home video and all that, the first Star Wars played until the next one came out. So I remember going to see it probably in early 1980, and I just remembered the sounds. I didn't remember the images. But one of my first memories of going to the theater to see a film was probably when I was 4. There was a drive-in theater near my house, and I saw a double feature of Cinderella and Tron, and I remember that for some reason. So film, I guess, again.
That's intriguing. So you were about 2. You were listening to this thing again, right? Why do you think this memory, of all your memories, is so clear?
I think it was just kind of impressive. There was something about anyone who's seen Star Wars, that opening, the music and, the laser sounds and everything. So just think about that if like the first time you've ever really like your folks have sat you down to watch something. Yeah. That's your first experience. That's gotta do something to your brain.
Yeah. Hey, well, Rob, can I offer an interpretation to the thought picture you created in my mind?
Sure.
I love the fact that which one travels faster? Sound, wait, I usually get this. So first you hear thunder and then you see lightning. No, first you see lightning and then it's A, B, C, D, E. Yeah, so it's lightning first, then sound, yeah? So it's light, then sound.
Well, the thing that's interesting is before I got into radio, there was a guy who was a master mixer here in Detroit. He had worked in stereo experiments. He had done, basically he was a main mixer for film and television productions here in Detroit. And Jerry's probably biggest claim to fame from a feature film standpoint was he mixed the first two Evil Dead movies. But Jerry told me, he said that, auditory is primal. He goes, we often hear things before we see them. And so he goes, if you go to a movie and there's something wrong with the audio, if the audio is bad where you can't make out the dialogue, you'll tune out quicker than if the image is shaky or a little out of focus. He's like, we can forgive shaky or out of focus images, but we can't forgive bad audio. Yeah. And that's the thing he always told me was bad audio will turn people off on a film or a TV show quicker than anything else.
Well, there we go. Thanks for that. So definitely, you helped my interpretation, right, to the thought picture, which is, and it came through the entire conversation where you're constantly in the building model of your life, but from sound, from what you're listening to. More importantly, what you're listening to with yourself.
True.
Like you're listening to yourself. Okay, I've reached this point. Enough of radio. All right, I'm out. Right then, okay, I'm missing radio a bit. Opportunity comes. Okay, I'm podcasting a bit. And now where you are, where you're listening to yourself in the art of storytelling and helping by funding what you're funding and helping with those crowdfunding models. That is pretty intriguing that it connected from way back then.
True. Yeah, because it's all about stories. When we think about it, doesn't matter what it is. Could be advertising, could be interpersonal relationships, could be political campaigns. It's all about storytelling. It's all about people wanting you to buy their story. It's all about people wanting to connect with you with their story. And, I found over my years that those who have the best stories, they win. Those who can engage you the best, they connect with you, and that's how they win. Yeah. Doesn't matter,
Yeah, love it. If we fast forward, Rob, to when you were 12 years old, what was your favorite song?
12 years old, man. I remember finding my dad's record collection. He had a small record collection, but it was a good one. And I remember constantly listening to. He had this Best of Cream album that I liked. There was something about recontextualized late 60s British blues that I liked that got me into the real thing. So I was eventually like, who's this Howlin' Wolf guy? Who's this Robert Johnson guy? And then I got into real blues, and I kind of put the British blues away. Not that I don't like it, but sometimes you got to go to the source, and you find that the source is much richer for you.
Yeah, like the real cream, right?
Right. Exactly.
Love it. Well, Rob, hey, we've arrived at our destination, but before we get off of this time machine, there's a small declaration form. So it's yes or no, possibly a bit more. We're going to go pretty quickly here. Rob, are you ready?
Sure.
Rob, have you chosen someone to pass on your skills to?
I've worked over the years with numerous interns through my jobs, but I don't have someone in particular that I've passed it on to.
Are you married?
Yes, I am. I just got married a week ago, Saturday.
Wow, congratulations. And you're already on the mic again. Wow.
No rest for the wicked.
Do you have children?
No, I don't. I have 2 cats, and they keep me plenty busy.
Yeah, they count, right? They count. Do you believe in God?
No.
Do you have an inner circle of friends?
Oh, of course, yeah.
What about TV? I'm intrigued to know, do you watch TV more than 3 hours a day?
No, not at all.
How about 3 hours a week?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. What about screen time, the phone and or the computer? Is it more than 8 or less than 8 hours a day?
I would say it's maybe close to, because of my job, being that it is crowdfunding and a lot of it's online. There's a lot of work that I do that's related to being on a computer.
Rob, after 1,001 conversations in 3 months in 2016, I came up with a workbook. The idea was to ask questions that would bring self-reflection to help you identify your own unique real self, and then hopefully be able to identify your mission, which I term your own unique real statement. I'd like to know if you had to share with us your own unique real statement, a statement that represents Rob St. Mary. What would you say that is?
I would say that it's, always be seeking. I mean, there's one thing that I think the reason why I got into radio in general and why interviewing and talking to people is so fascinating for me is I'm always trying to figure things out, and I'm always trying to understand why we do the things we do and how sort of life is lived. And this is, I think, something that's been my charge since I was a small child. So just always ask questions. I mean, the one thing I always used to tell interns and reporters who were starting out, it's better for them to say no than to not know. It's better to be rejected or turned down than to feel weird for asking a question, because you could receive that knowledge that could help you. You don't want to walk away from a scenario in which you could have said something and maybe that could have helped you in some way. And just never feel ashamed to ask questions. My dad always said, there are no stupid questions when I was a kid. Yeah.
Hey, Rob, this was a great pleasure. Before you leave, is there anything else you'd like to share with our amazing audience?
No, I thank you for reaching out, and it's always nice to have a little chat every now and then with folks who are doing interesting things, and it's like I said, I don't get a chance to talk too often to folks from the Caribbean. So hello to the folks down there. It's nice and warm with the lovely blue water you have, and you definitely got more sunshine than we do today.
Hey, I appreciate you having a new sunshine in your life, right? 1 week now. All the best on that journey. Wish you all the best again by 2, right? So Rob, again, a great pleasure. Thank you for being on What is Inspired by 12-Minute Convos with Angel Jones.
Cheers.
Thank you for being on 12-Minute Convos with Angel Jones. Stay tuned for more from our advertisers.
Diabetes is a mountain pandemic. It's a disease that's not acute but chronic. Similar to this rhyming method, I have simplified the definition, the signs and symptoms, and the complications of diabetes for both adults and children in my books, Poems for Patients, A Focus on Diabetes, and The ABCs of Diabetes for Children. These books are available on Amazon.com, and for more information, you can visit my website, poemsbyaj.com. That's poemsbyaj.com.